What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. Now I'm in the middle of 100 years, the greatest 150 black fighters of all times, Curtis Anderson and myself. I really dug deep because we wanted to give all opportunities to the forgotten great black fighters in boxing history to be placed on this list. There are quite a few names we had to let go. To look at the Black Murders Row, Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Now, Phase 1 consisted of Sam Langford, Harry Wills, Joe Jeanette, Sam McVeigh, Jack Johnson. We took a look at Dave Holly. We took a look at Jack Blackburn. We look at the second phase of Black Murders Row. There we took a look at Kid Norfolk, Alabama Kid. Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt. We looked at Lee Anderson, Nobby Joe Gans, Allentown Joe Gans, and Panama Joe Gans. We took a look at the third wave of the Black Murders Row. There were 8 of those members. Black Dynamite, Eddie Booker, born San Jose, California. Entered in the Hall of Fame. Fought from 1935 to 1944. He would lose one fight to Coco Kid, win one fight to Archie Moore, and he would lose 2 to Archie Moore. Win one to Lloyd Marshall, lost one to Jack Chase. Lost his California State Middleweight Championship and Light Heavyweight Championship to the same man. And that was Jack Chase. He had Coco Kid, Burt Littell, Lloyd Marshall, Holman Williams, Little Tiger Aaron Wade, Charlie Burley. He had fighters such as Ezzard Charles and Archie Moore. He had Jersey Joe Walcott. All great black fighters during that time. But you would have 2 black heavyweight champions. That was the name of the title itself. Black Heavyweight Champion. You had 13 Colored Heavyweight Champions. That was the name of the title. Colored Heavyweight Champion. Between 1876 and 1942, you would have 2 colored light heavyweight champions. And each man would win the title twice. That would be Kid Norfolk and Lee Anderson. You had 4 colored welterweight champions. Coco Kid would win it twice. He would lose it in 1938 to Charlie Burley, but he would pick it back up once again. He would defeat young Peter Jackson for that crown. But you had some good ones. Eddie Palmer is another good one. But then you had a colored light heavyweight champion, Lee Patterson. Called him Leo Patterson. Nobby Joe Gans. And these men were something else. You don't hear much about these fighters, but I got news for you. They were something else. They had fighters such as Charles A.C. Smith, known as the Black Thunderbolt. He was born May 3rd, 1860 in Macon, Georgia. He died October 1st, 1924. He was 64 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Buffalo, New York. You also had Black Dynamite, Harry Woodson, born January 1st, 1858, Cincinnati, Ohio. He died September 20th, 1887. And he would reside in St. Paul, Minnesota. He stood 5 foot 7.5 inches, had a 82-inch reach. He was 29 years of age at the time of his death. You have Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler. He was born April 1st, 1868 in Columbus, Ohio. He died January 1st, 1943 in Harlem, New York. Now, a lot of these men could be found at Grubb's Gym, located on 116th Street in Harlem, New York. And he had some great black fighters pass through that gymnasium. And the chief trainer in that gym would be Harry Wiley Sr. You would also have Soldier Jones and many others. You got Professor Charles Hadley, born September 30th, 1846, Nashville, Tennessee. He would die June 28th, 1897, in St. Paul's, Minnesota. He stood 5'9" and he was a heavyweight. But he was a phenomenal fighter. Was the Professor Charles Hadley. We would have Morris Grant. He was born May 11th, 1845, in St. James Island, South Carolina. He died May 23rd, 1915. He was 70 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in St. James Island in South Carolina. He stood 6'1.5". He was a heavyweight. Fought Professor Charles Hadley 7 times. He won 1 and lost 6. Charles Hadley was a champion January 14th, 1881. He defeated Morris Grant. Defeated him in 3 rounds. Then you would have George Godfrey. And what was amazing about him, February 23rd, 1883, defeated Charles Hadley, knocked him out in 6 rounds. They called him Old Chocolate, or Boston George. He was born March 30th, 1853, in Charlotte's own Prince Edward Island in Canada. Another Canadian heavyweight that would become champion. He died October 17th, 1901. He was 48 years of age at the time of his death. And he would suffer. He would suffer the same disease as the great old master, Joe Gans. He would die of tuberculosis. Now, he stood 5'10.5". He was a heavyweight. Fought from 1879 to 1896. But then you would have the Black Prince, Peter Jackson. He was born July 3rd, 1861. U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Croix to be exact. He would die July 13th, 1901 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. He was 40 years of age at the time of his death. He stood 6'1.5" and had a 77-inch reach. Had a record of 78 wins. But a lot of those fights were unrecorded. So they have him in the records book as 42 wins, 5 losses, 29 knockouts. Have him stopped 3 times with 3 draws. He fought from 1882 to 1899. And during that time, he would become the Australian and the colored heavyweight champion of the world. The Black Prince, Peter Jackson, would have a cousin by the name of Peter Felix. Peter Jackson would defeat Old Chocolate, George Godfrey, for his title. Boy, 19 rounds was a long time during those years. But that's how long it took. And if you think that was a long time, Peter Jackson was in the ring with Jim Corbett, 61 rounds. He became the colored heavyweight champion, August 24th, 1888, when he knocked out George Godfrey in 19 rounds. May 21st, 1891, he fought Jim Corbett, 61-round draw. May 30th, 1892, he would knock out Frank Slavin, another prestigious name during his day. Then you would have Bob Armstrong, who would pick up the colored heavyweight championship belt when Peter Jackson would relinquish it. He would vacate that title. But Bob Armstrong was born September 4th, 1873, in Rogersville, Tennessee. He died January 5th, 1933, Washington District of Columbia. He was 59 years of age at the time of his death. And he stood 6'4" and had a 79-inch reach. Bob Armstrong would have a record of 33 total bouts, 17 wins, 10 losses, 15 knockouts, and he'd be stopped 5 times. Would have 5 draws, fought between 1894 and 1904. He was a sparring partner for Tom Sharkey, who was known as the Sailor Man, Ruby Robert Fitzsimmons, who was a 3-time world champion. You see, as a middleweight, he would defeat non-parallel Jack Dempsey. As a light heavyweight, he would defeat George Gardner. And as a heavyweight, he would knock out Gentleman Jim Corbett with the famous solar plexus punch, Carson City, Nevada. Now, Bob Armstrong would be in the ring with Black Fitzsimmons, September 23rd, 1909. He was known as Kid Monday, stopped him in 1 round. June 10th, 1903. He would face Denver Ed Martin 3 times. 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. He fought Charlie Strong for the vacant colored heavyweight championship that was vacated by Peter Jackson. Then you would have Frank Childs. He was known as the Crafty Texan. He was born July 17th, 1867. He died in Chicago, 1934. He was 66 years of age at the time of his death. He stood 5 foot 9.5 inches. He was a heavyweight. Fought from 1892 to 1911. Had 60 total bouts, winning 42, losing 8, with 25 knockouts. He was stopped twice and had 8 draws. Defeated George Byers, 1 win, 1 loss. Fought him twice in Chicago. Being in the ring with Jack Johnson, Dan Creedon, Joe Walcott, and Joe Jowinski. He was defeated by Jack Johnson, Tom Stockton, and Denver Ed Martin. We take out Charlie Strongboy, Bob Armstrong twice, Klondike Haynes, and George Grant twice, George LeBlancy, and Joe Butler. Now LeBlancy picked up Childs by the waistline and body slammed him to the ground. Childs recovers and gets him in a half Nelson. The police would jump in and stop the bout. January 29th, 1898, he knocked out Bob Armstrong in 2 rounds. Frank Childs was something else. But then you would have George Byers, born June 25th, 1872. He died April 10th, 1937. He was 64 years of age at the time of his death. And he would reside in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, in Canada. He stood 5 foot 8.5 inches. He was a middleweight. Had a total bout record of 50 fights, 20 wins, 7 losses, 14 knockouts. He was stopped 4 times and had 20 draws. He drew 6 rounds with Frank Childs, March 16th, 1900, to unify the black and colored heavyweight championship title. Now Jack Root, January 18th, 1901. Byers was down 5 times in 7 rounds. He lost 17 rounds by knockout to Frank Childs to become the colored heavyweight champion of the world. They were fighting Hot Springs. And Frank Childs defeated George Byers, March 16th, 1901, by 17-round knockout. Denver Ed Martin, a Colorado Giant, who was born September 10th, 1881, in Denver, Colorado, died in Portland, Oregon. He stood 6 foot 3.25 inches. He had an 80.5-inch reach. He was a heavyweight. Had a total bout career of 40 fights, 25 wins, 6 losses, 18 knockouts, and he was stopped 8 times. Fought from 1899 to 1921. Defeated the likes of Frank Craig, Bob Armstrong, Sandy Ferguson, Hank Griffin, Klondike Haynes. July 25th, 1902. He defends his colored heavyweight championship title against Bob Armstrong in a 24 square foot ring, that housed 22,000 spectators. And he challenged the winner, Jim Jeffries and Bob Fitzsimmons. February 5th, 1903, would take on Jack Johnson. And Johnson would win the colored title over Denver Ed Martin in 20 rounds. And Jack Johnson would now become the brand new colored heavyweight champion of the world. Denver Ed Martin would become Gus Rulon's sparring partner, November 1900. January 1910, Martin would become a porter on the San Francisco train lines, and he would pretend that he was Jack Johnson. It worked for a few months. And once they realized it wasn't Jack Johnson, they threw him off the train. Jack Johnson became the colored heavyweight champion, February 5th, 1903, 20 rounds, when he defeated Denver Ed Martin. Now, Jack Johnson was born as John Arthur Johnson, March 31st, 1878, Galveston, Texas. He died June 10th, 1946. He was only 68 years of age at the time of his death. And he would reside in Raleigh, North Carolina. You see, it was said that he was going to see Joe Louis and Billy Conn in their second fight. Fought from 1897 to 1931. Stood 6'1.5" inches. Had a 74-inch reach. Defeated Joe Jeanette, Sam Langford, battling Jim Johnson. Jim Jeffries fought on July 4th, 1910, Reno, Nevada. 15 rounds. He would knock him out. And Tex Rickard, who was the promoter at that time, didn't like Jack Johnson. But Jack Johnson would face Stanley Ketchel, October 16, 1909, Madison Square Garden, and he would stop him in 12 rounds. The referee was Jack Welch. Jack Welch would also referee Jack Johnson and Jess Willard. 1915, 26-round stoppage. Or was it a deal that Jack Johnson had made with the government? Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, May 19, 1909, the National Athletic Club in Philadelphia. And he would draw with him 6 rounds. He would take on Tommy Burns, December 26, 1908, Sydney Stadium, Australia, 14-round knockout. Be in the ring with Sam McVeigh, Black Bill, Joe Grimm, Frank Childs, Marvin Hart, Jack Jeffries, who was the brother of Jim Jeffries, Joe Butler, Sandy Ferguson, Hank Griffin, George Gardner, who was a former light heavyweight champion, Peter Felix, who was a cousin of the Black Prince, Peter Jackson. Marvin Hart had several opportunities as champion. You see, Marvin Hart would have to take on George Gardner for George Gardner's portion of the light heavyweight championship belt. You see, Jack Root had to take on Charles Kid McCoy for his portion. And those two would then unify the title. And that would happen in 1903. Now, Jack Johnson would lose his title to Jess Willard, April 5th, 1915, Oriental Park in Cuba, Havana. 26 rounds. They would rule it as a knockout. Sam McVeigh was a colored heavyweight champion, February 20th, 1909, 20 rounds. And he would defeat Joe Jeanette. Sam McVeigh was born May 17th, 1884, Oxnard, California. He would die December 23rd, 1921. He was just 37 years of age at the time of his death. And he would reside in Oxnard, California. He stood 5'10.5" had a 75-inch reach, fought from 1902 to 1921. He was known as the Oxnard Cyclone. Had a total bout career of 102 fights, with 76 wins, 13 losses, 62 knockouts, and he was stopped 5 times. Fought Sam Langford 15 times, battling Jim Johnson 7 times, Harry Wills 5 times, Jack Johnson 3 times, faced Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, as well as Jim Barry and Jack Thompson. Faced Joe Jeanette, February 20th, 1909, 20 rounds. It was considered colored heavyweight champion that was vacated by Jack Johnson. But you see, Jack Johnson was supposed to face Sam Langford. So since he didn't face Sam Langford would take claim of the black heavyweight title. So Sam Langford would be the black heavyweight champion for 6 months. And that title was unified between two men in the late 1800s. And Sam Langford would take on Klondike Haynes for that claimant of the black championship belt. April 17th, 1909, he would lose the color title in 49 rounds to Joe Jeanette. Fight took 2 hours and 24 minutes to complete. $6,000 was their purse. It was a total of 32 knockdowns. Jeanette went down 27 times. And Sam McVeigh went down 9 times. December 11th, 1909, they would fight once again in Paris, France. It would be a 20-round draw. These two men were something else. Joe Jeanette, he was the colored champion April 17th, 1909 over Sam McVeigh. He was born August 26, 1879 in North Bergen, New Jersey. Died July 2nd, 1958. He was 78 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Union City, New Jersey. His name was Jeremiah Jeanette. He stood 5 foot 10 inches, had a 74-inch reach, had a total bout career of 104 fights, 83 wins, 10 losses, 69 knockouts, and he would have 10 draws. He'd be in the ring with fighters such as John Lester Johnson. See, John Lester Johnson would crack Jack Dempsey's ribs. Jeanette would also be in the ring with Big Bill Tate, Sam Langford, battling Jim Johnson, Harry Wills, George Carpentier, Black Bill, Jeff Clark, George Kid Cotton. Then you would have Sam Langford. He'd become the color champion 5 times. September 6, 1910, April 8, 1912. Sam Langford. The fight again, May 1st, 1914, with Harry Wills. November 26, 1914. June 29, 1915. May 1st, 1917. He would have gained from Bill Tate. Sam Langford, I'm ranked number 1 as the greatest fighter of all times. And I also have him as the greatest first wave of Black Murderers Row fighter of all times. Bill Tate became color champion July 25th, 1917 against Sam Langford, who was born November 5th, 1893, Montgomery, Alabama. He died August 10th, 1953. He was 59 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Chicago, Illinois. He stood 6 foot 6 inches, had an 81-inch reach. He was a heavyweight. His name was William George Tate. Bill Tate was a corner man, along with George Chick, with Jack Dempsey, and Jess Willard, 1919's competition. That fight took place at Toledo, Ohio. Very hot day. One of the most destructive competitions in boxing history. See, Jess Willard had a half a dozen teeth knocked out, ribs broken, eye socket broken, jaw broken, hand broken. Incredible night that was. But Big Bill Tate had a record of 53 total bouts, 27 wins, 20 losses, 22 knockouts. And he was stopped 11 times. See, during those years, there was a lot of dives that took place. And there was sometimes you didn't even try to win the fight. But then there was a lot of legitimate losses as well. Bearcat Wright, Cecil Seal Harris, Tut Jackson, George Godfrey, Roughhouse Ware, Kid Norfolk, Harry Wills, Jack Johnson, Jack Thompson, George Kid Cotton, and Joe Jeanette were the victims of Big Bill Tate. Now I'll give you one more fighter. His name was George Godfrey. He was the color champion, November 8th, 1926. And he would lose it to Larry Gans. His name was Sylvester Williams. He was born January 25th, 1897, Mobile, Alabama. He died August 13th, 1947, in Lippeville, Pennsylvania. He would be known as the Lippeville Shadow, or the Black Shadow of Mobile, Alabama. He stood 6'2.5" at a 79.5-inch reach. He was a heavyweight. Had total bout career of 126 fights, 99 wins, 21 losses. He would have 81 knockouts. He would stop 6 times and had 2 draws. He would take on Al Walker, the colored heavyweight championship belt. And Al Walker stood 6 foot. He was a heavyweight. Faced Obie Walker, April 9th, 1931. April 24th, 1931. He would lose the title to Obie Walker, who was 22 years old. They fought at the Philadelphia Arena, October 1933. George Godfrey was 36, and Obie Walker was 22. George Godfrey fought for the vacant belt that was stripped from Harry Wells after he was disqualified on a foul for facing Jack Sharkey. These are just many stories and the chain of the first and second wave of Black Murderers Row. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. On behalf of my brother Curtis Anderson, we're going to continue to list 100 years, the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. Thanks for listening. Until next video, have a good evening.